Alright, we're going to start Chapter 3. These are notes for solving quadratic equations. And first, what does it mean to solve an equation? Well, it means a couple things. It means that, you find the value of the variable. Find the value of the variable, x, y, whatever that variable is. Okay. And then if you're graphing, in terms of graphing, what you're doing is you're finding x-intercepts. These can also be called zeros. Solutions of the equation of the function. Okay. And the last thing you're going to hear these things called is roots. Sometimes they're called roots. That's what it means to solve an equation, and those are the words we often hear. And what we use is this zero property, which says that anything, if A times B equals 0, then either A or B is equal to 0. It could be either one, couldn't it? Okay, so if A times B equals 0, either this one, A, or this one B, or even both, I guess, could be 0. So what that means is one of these is A and one of these is B. And if either one is 0, then the answer is 0. So we just take these factors then and we set them equal to 0. And so in this case, if x was negative 3, then A would be equal to 0, and the answer would be 0. Or, if B is equal to 0, the 2x minus 1, then 2x is equal to 1, and x is equal to 1/2. Okay. So in that case, either negative 3 or 1/2 is your answer, because if either one of those things is 0, if we have either one of those things as our x value, then our answer will be 0, because then it's going to make one or the other of the factors equal 0. So basically you need to factor, if you can factor these quadratic equations, set the factors equal to 0, solve them for the variable. So here we have a difference of squares. So we have x plus 8 times x minus 8 equals 0. That means if either one of these is equal to 0, then we can find the answer. So x plus 8 equals 0. That means in this one, if x is negative 8, and in this second one, if x is positive 8, then my answer would end up being 0. So my answers are x equals 8 and negative 8, or negative 8 and 8. Now another way you could solve this problem is if I add the 64 across and end up with x squared equals 64, then you take the square root, x is equal to, because this exponent is even, you're going to have plus or minus over here, 64. And so then x is equal to plus or minus 8, which comes out to be the same thing, either plus or minus 8. Now looking at this next one, number 3, we need to factor that. So we have x times x. We need factors that multiply to be 21 and add to be 10. So that's going to be 7 and 3. They're both plus because both signs in the original equation are plus. So for this, x equals negative 7 and let's use negative 3 are your answers. Again, the way you get that is you say x plus 7 equals 0, and so x equals negative 7 if you're kind of confused a little bit, and x plus 3 equals 0, and so then x equals negative 3. Okay. Now we have this type of equation where we have a coefficient in front instead of just a 1. So we multiply the coefficient times our negative 5 and we find negative 10. We need things that will multiply to be negative 10 and add to be 9. Well, that's going to be 10 plus negative 1. Those would multiply to be negative 10 and add to be 9. So now we're going to split our middle term, and we're going to say 2x minus 1 plus 2x squared minus 1x, plus 10x, and then minus 5 equals 0. Use your grouping strategy. Nothing will factor out of this except an x, so you have x times 2 minus 2x minus 1 and plus 2 and that plus 5, excuse me, and that leaves you with 2x minus 1. So my factors then are 2x minus 1, that's one of them. I'm going to factor out a 2x minus 1, and the other one is x plus 5. So setting each of these equal to 0 then, x plus 5 is easy. That's going to give me x equals negative 5. And the 2x minus 1, we've already, that's actually we've done up here, and so we can see that's going to be x equals, bring your 1 over and then divide by 2. X equals 1/2. And so that's the answer to that one. So again, if you can factor them, and then set each factor equal to 0 and solve for the variable. Alright, let's move on to the next page. Okay. So what about if you can't factor them? Well, then we have our quadratic formula. And that's, you know, pop goes the weasel if you can't remember it. I won't sing it for you. I know you think that's terrible that I won't sing for you, but anyway. You can look it up on YouTube. There's lots of examples. But that's a good way to remember the quadratic formula. So look, the coefficient in front of here is 1, so a equals 1. This b is negative 6, and c equals 3. Alright, and so then you have x equals negative 6, that's negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so it's negative 6 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 3, all of that over 2a, so that's 2 times 1. And then that comes out to be positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 24, all of that over 2. Now the square root of 24 simplifies. 24 is 4 times 6. I'm going to write that up here. 4 times 6. So we can take the square root of 4. So that comes to be 6 plus or minus 2, because that's the square root of 4, times the square root of 6. All of that over 2. Now, 2 will divide into 6 3 times, and 2 will go into 2. So the answer is 3 plus or minus the square root of 6. That's your answer. Okay. Now looking at this, there is no x term, but we still have to write a b. In this case, a equals 1. and B equals 0, and C equals 2. Now we should know, because it's a binomial, it's not a difference of squares, it's a plus sign in between, that we can't, that there's no solution. But we can, if we're not sure, we can look. You have 0, you have negative 0, and that looks like a 6, so I'll fix that. Negative 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. All of that over 2 times 1. So we end up then with 0 plus or minus, so you don't have to put the 0, it's just plus or minus, negative 8 over 2. Okay, we don't know yet how to take the square root with a negative. So we can't take the square root of a negative unless we use a complex number. So there is no real solution. There are no x-intercepts if you graph this. No, it looks like one word. No real solution is what the answer is here. You can't take the square root of a negative. Okay, so this is no. Don't do that yet. We will eventually, but not yet. Alright, this we have our constant over here, so we need to bring it and make that 5x squared plus 7x minus 3. If it's not all equal to 0, you make it equal to 0. You bring everything over and set it equal to 0. So in this case now A is equal to 5, B is equal to 7, and C is equal to negative 3. And so we have x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 3, and this, if you notice, these are two negatives, so this is going to become a positive, and all of that is over 2 times 5, or 10. And that simplifies to be x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 109, and that divides by 10. And you can't simplify that anymore. You can't simplify under that radical. So that's kind of a big radical to remember. But if you tried to simplify it, you'd find that you could not do that. And so that would be our final answer. And this is, again, review pretty much for you Algebra 2 folks, but hopefully you will remember and do well in this section.